Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the first of our Education Transforms 2021 seminar series. I'd like to formally begin by acknowledging that we're meeting on the lands of the First Australians and to pay my respect to elders past, present and emerging, and to extend that respect to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders who have joined us today. The Peter Underwood Centre is a partnership between the University of Tasmania and the state government in conjunction with the Office of the Governor of Tasmania. We've got a vision that all young Tasmanians will flourish through the transformative power of learning. And we engage in research, partnerships and initiatives to contribute to the positive and sustained change in educational outcomes for children and young people. An important part of the work that we do is to share the work of ourselves and others with people who can also make a difference to educational attainment, because we firmly believe that education is everyone's business. So this seminar today represents the first of a series, and we are investigating some new ways of sharing that information. So we hope that this format will reach a broader range of interested people than perhaps might have come to some more traditional conferences. And importantly, it means that we can hear the voices of many more people who share our interest and our mission. So we're very excited today to begin our ET 2021 series with our collaborators from the Brave Foundation. So before I hand over to my colleagues, I do need to let you know that a bit later on this afternoon, I'm going to be speaking with Ebony, who is an inspirational young woman, a young mum, who is currently completing her degree. And she's going to share with us her lived experience and talk to everybody about where she is now. And it's a fantastic story that I know that you'll all enjoy, but there'll also be an opportunity for you to help shape that story. So if you have some questions that you might like to ask Ebony, I'll invite you to put them into the chat. So we'll see those questions in the studio. The others in the audience won't see those questions, but we'll be able to use those a little bit later on. So without anything further, I'm going to now hand you over to Professor Kitty Riele, who is our Director of Research here at the Peter Underwood Centre. So welcome, Kitty.
Thanks so much, Natalie, and hello everyone. About 2 years ago, Bernadette Black from the Brave Foundation contacted us to see if we could evaluate their Supporting Expecting and Parenting Teens program. Now, this is exactly the kind of research we love to do, because it's an opportunity for our work to support organisations like the Brave Foundation to, in turn, support the young people they work with to benefit from the transformative power of learning. So to provide a little bit of background, I'm going to start us off with some statistics and a little bit about the right to education for young parents to education. Alright, so here's our first slide. One way to think about teenage pregnancy is through the teenage fertility rate. That refers to the number of teenagers who give birth out of 1,000 births given in Australia. So in 1975, out of every 1,000 babies born in Australia, 40 were born by teenage mums. Now this graph shows the rate in more recent years between 2014 and 2019. In that period, across Australia, you can see that the rate has gone down from about 13 to about 9 babies with teenage mums out of every 1,000 babies born. And in Tasmania, the rate has gone down from 20 babies in 2014 to 12 in 2019. So, what does that mean in terms of the actual numbers of teenage mums? The blue diagram is for Australia, and it shows that if you add up all of those babies born between 2014 and 2019, the total number of babies with teenage mums across Australia was 46,000. In Tasmania, the orange graph, the total for that period is 1,400 mums, babies with teenage mums. So in short, yes, every year it is less common for babies to be born to teenage mums, but there are still thousands of teenagers across Australia who are pregnant or have a young bub every year. Many of these young parents are of compulsory school age and fall under the protection of the Convention on the Rights of the Child. So in 2016, the United Nations Committee on the Rights of the Child published a report particularly about rights during adolescence. The committee explained the kind of support that is required for teenagers who are parents or caregivers. It focused on things like knowledge about children's health, support to help these teenagers live up to their responsibilities for their children, and also material assistance. And the committee highlighted that for adolescent caregivers, they need extra support in order to enjoy their rights to education, play, and participation. The National Children's Commissioner in Australia, in 2017, in her Children's Rights Report, included an excellent chapter about teenage parents. The photo on the slide is from that report, and it shows the Commissioner, Megan Mitchell, with some of the young parents who were part of her consultation. Now, in her report, she points out that under anti-discrimination legislation in Australia, it is illegal to discriminate against anyone on the basis of pregnancy, breastfeeding, or being a parent. And of course, that also applies to education. Moreover, in Australia in recent years, there have been changes to education legislation. So it's now compulsory across all of Australia to stay in school until you're 17 or 18, unless you have an approved alternative like going to TAFE. So in other words, young parents have both a right and a legal obligation to stay in education. In Tasmania, the Department of Education has a particular policy specific to supporting pregnant and parenting young people. Now, really important, this policy states that it actually is not a valid reason to give a student an exemption from school just on the basis of being pregnant or being a parent. Instead, the policy makes it clear that schools are responsible for putting the supports in place that students need when they're pregnant or parenting to stay in school. It's based on two general principles: that schools will be places where these students are welcome, and that schools will take action to prevent both direct and indirect discrimination on the basis of being a parent or being pregnant. And indirect discrimination is especially interesting. It may include things like insisting that the student wears a school uniform, which could be a bit uncomfortable when you're pregnant, or a lack of flexibility in the timetable. The photo on this slide is of the Young Mums program at Claremont College in Hobart. To support teenage parents with their education, it's important for us to look beyond the statistics and listen to what these young people have to say themselves. Pregnant and parenting teens have high aspirations for themselves and for their child. As a young mum in our report said, we do want to be a good parent and give the best to our children and to reconnect to education or employment and improve our lives. So to make sure that we hear the voices of young parents, this webinar will include 4 videos which have their stories, and of course, like Natalie said, later on we'll hear from Ebony live in the studio as well. The first video tells the story of Caitlin in her own words. Caitlin is a young mum who was supported by the Brave Foundation. We have created this video in a way that protects Caitlin's privacy. After the video, you'll hear from Bernadette, the CEO and founder of the Brave Foundation.
Caitlin is a single mum. She is 19 years old and her daughter Fleur is 17 months. This story is in Caitlin's own words. I was in a long-term relationship when I fell pregnant with Fleur, but I left him halfway through my pregnancy. And I don't have a very good relationship with my family, so I was kind of doing pregnancy solo. I first met Kath from Brave in the maternity ward and she gave me her contact details. When Fleur was 6 weeks old, I got in contact and we met up and I got started on the Brave program. That was in August 2018. I was a bit deflated and at a low point at the time because I was going through a lot with becoming a new mum and not having any emotional support. And then everything started to kick off with Brave, making calls and plans and having something to work towards. It helped improve my mental health and kept me focused on where I was going. The emotional support has made the most difference to me and my daughter. Being able to go to my 2 Brave mentors, Kath and Sue, and know they are there to help. That's just a huge thing, to know I've got people who believe in me and who I have in my corner. Being able to have goals and meet them, to have accomplishments and put myself in a better situation for my daughter and myself has really helped me feel good inside myself and be a good mother. I never thought I'd go to university, but now I've completed school, I want to work towards going to university so I can study something in human services. Because of the support I've had from Brave, I feel like I've got a better future that I'm looking forward to now.
Hello, my name is Bernadette Black. I am the CEO and founding director of Brave Foundation. My goodness, the Brave Foundation story has been somewhat of an overnight 15-year success, and it started with my own journey as a 16-year-old mother myself. I wrote a book about my journey called Brave Little Bear, and that was in 2006. And I can remember after that time, it was the first national book that was published in Australia that was an inspirational story of a teenage mother, that I actually got phone calls from all over Australia, from people, teachers, health professionals, young parents themselves, asking me how they could support themselves or the young person that they were supporting to be able to finish their education and get support. I can remember the first one was from Toowoomba in Queensland, and so I picked up the phone, I rang the hospital, I rang what I could find was a young mums group at the local council, and figuratively connected these dots, then rang back the person that called me and said to them what they would be able to do to support this young woman that wanted to finish her education. Little did I know that Directory of Services would one day, today it stands at over 900 services and is licensed by the federal government. So it has been an incredible journey. That Directory of Services was such pride of place for Brave Foundation and is still something that we add to today. We call that directory a part of the village of support at Brave Foundation. And we really believe, I love the wording with transformation in education from the Peter Underwood Centre, because it's something that's very important to Brave Foundation, is that we realise the boundless potential in each young person that we work with so that they can create goals, dreams and happy, healthy lives and families. So the synergies are huge, and we love being able to partner with young parents to see this achieved. A few years into my journey, we actually received a magnificent bequest from a lady called Anne Tomlinson Walsh. And we wonder whether she was a young mother herself. We have a couple of photos of her, and they are very cherished, and we're the only ones that have those. And so she left half of her bequest to Brave Foundation, and that meant that the board, which we had at the time, and former Premier David Bartlett was chair, that they were able to employ 2 of us to be able to run Brave Foundation. I was running another charity at the time and had been working on Brave Foundation off the side of a desk, building the Directory of Services and doing a whole lot of study to learn how we could actually create an excellent charity that was going to serve expecting and parenting teens well. Some of the work that David and I did in that first year was bringing together a steering group, which was a national group that was anyone that you could think of that would be on the trajectory of an expecting or parenting teen's journey, that they were going to be in that room. Now, when you think about it, for an expecting or parenting teen, from expecting to 2 years of age, so we actually mirrored the 1000 Days Manifesto, there are a lot of services that can provide support to an expecting or parenting teen. There was actually 30 that were in our working group. And so we had principals, we had researchers, we had maternal and child health nurses, we also had psychologists, social workers, Centrelink, you name it, different government departments, they were there. But what was interesting was that each of these organisations all were able to help the young people that we aim to serve in a different way. And together they painted a full holistic picture. I think what is most memorable for me and for our team at that time was actually seeing 5 young parents. We made sure lived expertise is something that is so vital to Brave Foundation in our design and in our strategy. And so we invited 5 young parents to come and to be a part of that steering group. And they looked at this room and they saw these 30 organisations, and their questions to us were, how do we know who they are and how do we connect with them? So their recommendations to us were, could you provide us one person to help us navigate all of these services? And can we trust that person? Can we build a relationship with them? And can we work with them over a longer period of time? And so the pathway plan was then established. The pathway plan was actually something that teen parents did inform us, as did everyone on that working group. And it goes from expecting through to a child's 2nd year of age, as I said before. But what's most important about it is that teen parents commit to 3 goals or dreams, aspirations that they might have for their future. One that aligns to education, and health is the second. And the third is also looking at what job they might get into one day. And so those goals are very important, and sometimes there are a whole lot of sub-goals that we have found with teenage parents that they need to meet before they can make those big goals of maybe wanting to become a hairdresser, wanting to go to university, wanting to go to TAFE. And we've certainly seen in those sub-goals that we have had teen parents that haven't even had their own birth certificate. I mean, imagine being able to go for a job if you don't have your own ID. Medicare cards are another challenge, and I recall a few young parents saying they thought they might have seen their friends or parents with them. And so it was really important for us to be able to work and walk alongside young parents on their own pathway planned, and then to be able to help them to achieve those goals and dreams and aspirations. Something that's also been important to us along the pathway plan timeline, each mentor works with up to 25 expecting and parenting teens, and we now have a team. We've had up to 21 staff in Brave Foundation. We were awarded $4.5 million in 2017 from the federal government. And that saw us go into the Northern Territory, down the eastern seaboard of Australia, and down in Tasmania, where we are recording from today. And what we saw during that time with our explosion of from 2 to 21 staff was working with up to 500 young parents expecting and parenting teens in that time. Now, I talked about their goals. I talked about how our aim is to be able to see their boundless potential realised. But something that we have seen as a challenge, and for so many young parents, has been stigma. I have a very short answer to this. We don't engage with stigma. Having pioneered Brave, having lived the teen parenting story, I can tell you that I have experienced it a lot. And I know many of the teen parents that we advocate for and work with do on a daily basis. But for all of us, if you're out in the bus mall and you see a young person with a pram, we don't know what's happened that morning. We don't know what they've walked out from. Your smile, my smile, can make the world to them, and we just don't know what opportunities they might be facing themselves that day. I think something else that we've certainly learned as we've journeyed with young parents is the systemic challenges and barriers that we see, that we face with governments. And like we saw in that room with the working group when we saw 30 organisations, it is our dream that our governments, our not-for-profit sector, that all of us can collaborate so that we can see a young person expecting parenting teen as a whole, in their wholeness, and that human-centered policy design, instead of through a series of disconnected transactions. We have had such a journey. I'm going to throw to a PowerPoint now, which actually shows a little bit of the roller coaster of that 15-year overnight success. And you will see on it, it looks a little bit like a roller coaster. Last year for us was a bit like a roller coaster. Like indeed, we actually thought with COVID that came, we actually were meant to be growing in number, with the federal government had penciled us into the budget. And at that point when COVID hit, we were told that we would have to wind up quickly. So we actually, I had those conversations with 20 staff, my incredible COO as well, our executive team, our board were amazing. And that was tough. But then we found out 3 weeks later, and the government had realised teen parents needed our help more than ever. We'd actually had a 240% increase in our meetings with teen parents across Australia. And so we were just so excited to be able to continue our program. And most recently, we have been awarded $6 million from the Department of Women, Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet, through the Women's Department. And that is tremendous. We will be able to support another 1,000 expecting and parenting teens around Australia, and branching into South Australia and Western Australia. Through expecting and parenting teens' eyes, we have learned so much. I think for us to see them as a whole, for us to be able to see their boundless potential, and for us to be able to see them reach their goals and dreams and aspirations is certainly worth living for each of us. When we see our young parents thrive, their children thrive, we see that change for generations. So I encourage you and implore you to smile at an expecting and parenting teen in the mall or wherever you might be in your community. We are going to shortly be able to hear from one of our incredible participants. Her name is April, and she's going to be meeting with her mentor, Steph, who you will see in a video shortly.
Hello, I am Stephanie and I am a Brave Foundation mentor. I am excited to introduce you to a very brave past participant, April. April is now 19 years old and has a 18-month-year-old. April started our program in August 2019. April today is going to share with you her education goals and journey of the SEP program and parenthood. Welcome, April.
Thank you. I left after the first term in year 11 after I found out I was pregnant when I was 16.
Mm-hmm.
And then I moved to the Young Parents program at Chisholm in Frankston.
Can you tell us a bit about your experience in that program?
Yeah, it's a really good program. It's very supportive, and there's a lot of different types of supports that are available. For example, like help with Centrelink, and things that are useful outside of a schooling environment as well. Also, like tips for looking after your kids, maternal child health, that sort of thing is also available within the program. So that really helped me a lot. I started my community services course before I was pregnant. So I completed my Certificate 3 over 2 years when I was doing year 11 and 12. And now I'm on to my Cert 4 in youth work. So my end career goal is something in the youth sector. Hopefully, I'd like to come full circle and end up working with young mums as well.
So you finished year 12 last year, which is a huge achievement, particularly in the times of COVID. What difference do you think this is making for your son?
I think me being able to finish year 12 allows a lot more opportunities career-wise and education-wise. So I'm able to do more things, and also I feel like I gained a lot of knowledge and like a lot of life skills, and just like general experience from being in the program that I can carry without, the rest of our lives. And we also made a lot of friends and a lot of good connections as well. So I think that's like a very important thing to carry out after finishing the program.
Thank you so much for your willingness to share your experience and your education journey. It has been amazing to hear about your experiences. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Such a great story from April. In this next bit, I'm going to tell you about some of our findings from our research about the Supporting Expecting and Parenting Teens program. So the research had two phases. The first phase, we did our own interviews, and we also analysed data that the Brave Foundation provided and their own documentation. And we published a report about that in June last year, 2020. And then this year the Brave Foundation asked us, could we do some extra data analysis? And so we've looked at all of the data from when participants first enrolled in CEPT in July 2018 through to the end of February 2021. And we also then had to break that down by regions, do an analysis comparing the 5 regions. Now, while I am the one talking here today, it was actually my colleague, Dr. Aisha Bakhtiar, who crunched the data so incredibly wonderfully. So I want to acknowledge the amazing work that she did. So the CEPT program operated across 5 locations, and you can see them on the map there. Between July 2018 and February this year, 385 young people had finished their participation in the CEPT program. 54 of those were in Tasmania, 51 young women and 3 young men. Now, finishing their participation can mean a few different things. 45% had finished because they had actually completed all of the core components of the program and they were off on their own way. 37% had started, but then for some reason had informally withdrawn, and even though a mentor tried to re-engage them with the program, that wasn't successful. And then another 18% left officially because, for example, they moved to a different region where CEPT wasn't operating. The average age of participants was about 20 when they started in the program, and teenagers made up just over half of the cohort of participants. Now, Bernie mentioned before that the Brave Foundation is really aligned with the ERACI commitment to the first 1,000 days of a baby's life, so from pregnancy through to age 2. And it's a really important stage for a child's development and well-being. So when we looked at the participants in CEPT, we counted the ones who were pregnant and the ones who had children up to the age of 2. And what we found is that about 80% were in that priority of supporting children in those first 1,000 days. Expecting and parenting young people experience all sorts of different challenges. There's intergenerational cycles of disadvantage. There might be lack of support from the mum's family or from the dad and the dad's family. There might be domestic violence and unhealthy relationships, mental illness, especially anxiety and depression, insecure or unsafe housing, and lack of access to transport. Now, often young people face these challenges even before they fell pregnant, but having a baby makes all those challenges even more acute. In addition, once they became a young parent, they faced systemic barriers due to stigma, as Bernie pointed out. Too often there are just such negative stereotypes about young parents, not just in the community, but also in services, in education and in the workplace. Often those challenges faced by young parents are interconnected and cumulative. So the quote on the slide is from a submission to the National Children's Commissioner's report in 2017, and it points out that a really consistent message from teenage parents is that they have high aspirations, hopes and dreams. But those hopes and dreams can be out of reach when all of those primary systems of care and services are too hard to navigate and they don't work well together. Again, that's what Bernie talked about as well. And so the landscape of service provision is complex. There are so many different services available, and of course some services come and go because maybe they are a pilot or maybe the funding runs out. And so at its heart, CEPT is a response to that problem. It supports expecting and parenting young people to navigate all those different services and to connect up the dots. The CEPT mentor is that one person who then helps participants to set their own goals, the goals that they want to achieve, and then connect them with the services that help them to achieve those goals. So on the slide you can see the 5 different types of goals that young people set. In total, over 1,300 goals were set by those 385 participants in the period that we analysed. Basic needs and life skills is around things like transport and housing, health and well-being, often around mental health, parenting, positive parenting skills, and of course employment and education. Because just like Parents Next, which is the federal government program that works with disadvantaged parents to try and make sure that they are not long-term dependent on welfare, just like Parents Next, the CEPT program also aims to enhance young parents' participation in and readiness for education and employment. 72% of the participants in CEPT had a goal that was to do with education or employment. And the vast majority of those goals were about actually enrolling in a course or completing a course, rather than just about readiness. But structural barriers can make enrolling in a course complex. So the first quote on the slide is about a young parent who was accepted into a course, but then she was unable to complete the compulsory literacy and numeracy assessment because she didn't have access to a computer. The mentor tried to help by arranging access to a computer in a neighbourhood centre, but then there was another barrier in terms of transport. Even when young people are enrolled in school or another provider, there may be challenges to do with maybe disability or being in a crisis, or to do with stigma or prejudice. And so the second example on the slide is about a participant who was being threatened by other students in the school. Fortunately, the school was onto it and dealt with it. So let's have a look at the actual achievement of goals by participants. Of the 385 participants we looked at, 304, so 79%, achieved at least one goal while they were in the program. Now this is really impressive because remember, only 45% of the cohort we looked at had actually completed all of the core components of the CEPT program. And of course that means they met their goals. So it shows on top of that 45%, there was another 34% of young people who completed at least one goal, even though they withdrew from the program before they'd completed everything. For participants with education or employment goals, 72% achieved at least one of their goals. We also looked across all of the goals, so all those 1,326 goals that the participants had set, to look at how many were achieved or were in progress by the time they finished. So being in progress but not yet achieved means things like goals that are an ongoing pursuit, like looking after your mental health. That's not something any of us ever achieve, it's always in progress. But also goals that might take longer to achieve than the period of time in the program, like completing a course, for example. Now the diagram shows that for all of the 5 categories, over 3/4 of the goals were achieved or in progress by the time the young person left the CEPT program. And for education, 60% were actually achieved and another 17% were in progress. So in addition to our report that we published in June last year, we also prepared a short fact sheet, only 4 pages, that has an overview and also some ideas of what everyone can do to support teenage parents with their education. The fact sheet can be downloaded from our website, and you can also access our June 2020 report there. But I'm getting confused here because in 2021, later this year, we will update that with the additional analysis that we're doing at the moment on the additional data from Brave. Now the next video tells the story of Jack. Jack is a young dad who was also supported by the Brave Foundation. And just like the video of Caitlin, this one we have edited to protect Jack's privacy. After the video, Natalie will be back and she will have a chat with Ebony. So as Natalie said, Ebony was a young mum who was supported by the Brave Foundation, but she's now studying at university and she's also a director on the Brave Foundation board. If you have any questions for Ebony that you would like Natalie to ask, pop them in the chat. Like Natalie explained, the chat is private, only we can see it.
Jack is a single dad. He's 22 years old and raising his 5-year-old son, Ethan. This is Jack's story. Jack was introduced to the Parents Next programme in March 2019. At that time, he was an early school leaver. He was already receiving support from Headspace for anxiety, depression and post-traumatic stress disorder, but he wanted and needed more support. Parents Next quickly referred Jack into the Brave CEPT programme, and he attended his first meeting with his new mentor, Laura, before the end of the month. He has been actively engaged in the programme and setting and achieving goals ever since. Jack lives in a regional area, and transport was a huge barrier for him. Laura helped him to apply for a Brave scholarship, which enabled him to start taking driving lessons. He now has his driving licence and his own car. Another important goal for Jack was to have a suitable home for him and Ethan. Laura helped him find a new place to live, and he moved in just before Christmas 2019. Jack is managing his anxiety, and with support from Laura, both Jack and Ethan have built their social skills. Jack is blossoming into a self-confident young man and father, and has formed friendships with other young parents in the CEPT programme. Jack is now looking ahead and planning his career. He's interested in applying for an IT traineeship. He's also pursuing his passion for woodwork to see where that might lead.
So it's great to hear Jack's story, so thank you very much for sharing that. So now this is, for me, the really exciting part of today's presentation when we get to meet Ebony, who is a director of the Brave board and a very inspirational young woman, and we'll hear a little bit about Ebony's story. So Ebony, welcome to the Peter Underwood Centre.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
So I thought we might start out by asking you to share with our viewers a little bit about where you are now. Tell us a little bit about your family and what you're doing in your education.
Sure. So I'm now 25, which I just worked out means it's nearly been about 10 years since I actually fell pregnant at 15 with my first daughter. I now have 3 children and I am married, but apart from that, I am studying full-time at UTAS, doing a Bachelor of Law and Arts, and I'm actually about to embark in my final semester, so that is very exciting. And outside of that, I'm also a board member for the Brave Foundation, which has been very pivotal in my journey.
That's fantastic. As I said, we've got a lot to learn from hearing Ebony's story. So, Ebony, can you take us back then 10 years ago now, as you said, when you first found out that you were expecting Ruby, your eldest daughter, and just explain to us a little bit about how it was for you during that time.
Sure. So it was nearly about 10 years ago. I was 15. I was in year 9 at a Catholic school, and still obviously living at home with my parents, who were probably more on the stricter side. So yeah, I was very, very nervous when I found out. I didn't actually tell anyone until I actually ended up telling my principal. She was the first adult that knew, because I still went to school that morning that I realised that I was pregnant, because I just couldn't bring myself to tell my parents yet, or to tell anyone. I actually told my twin sister before we left, but I made her swear that she wouldn't tell anyone. So yeah, it was quite a hard day. I sat with my best friend, and there were a lot of tears and a lot of crying. I contacted the father, who was my boyfriend at the time, and yeah, tried to work out how I could navigate this whole journey, until I ended up getting called into the principal's office, because obviously I wasn't in class how I should have been, which was really unlike me. And yeah, I told her, and she encouraged me to go and see the counsellor and make a plan to tell my parents, because obviously that was very important, that I needed to share with them. And yeah, we went from there.
So that's, I think all of us, can only but imagine how you might have felt like being very, very scared, I guess, with this having happened and being 15 years old, but navigating who you might work with in terms of telling and all of those kinds of things. So once you had the opportunity to talk with your principal about what your plan might be, I think part of that plan was to continue your education. Was that right?
Yeah. So that's correct. Eventually we worked out a bit of a plan, and that I would stay in school, and I would have my baby, who was due just in the Easter break. So I went to school until I was 9 months pregnant. I also worked part-time so that I could save up for things and buy all the necessities that you need for a baby. And yeah, I continued to study full-time, and then had about 6 weeks off over the Easter break and the term break, and I tried to come back to full-time school. And for me, that was really difficult. I think everyone kind of underestimated how difficult it would be putting a 6-week-old baby into full-time care. That was very challenging. So I ended up dropping back down to 3 days a week, and just doing the core units that I needed to finish year 10 at that stage, which were things like English and maths and things like that. So yeah, I went on to graduate with the rest of my class, which was great. It wasn't easy though. I definitely became quite isolated, I would say, especially in those days that I spent at home with my baby, even though it was a wonderful experience and getting to spend that time with her. I really couldn't relate to people my age anymore, so it was difficult, but I also couldn't relate to other people who were having babies, who were maybe 35, so I found myself in a really difficult position, and I struggled a little bit with my mental health, but things started to pick up when I turned about 17, and I moved out of home. I made that decision because I have lots of siblings and it was quite crowded at my mum's house. So I moved out with she was about nearly a year old, and I went to a different school for year 11, because my school only supported up to year 10. So I moved school, and I think that's where I really started to gain back my confidence, and because I just wasn't the teenage parent or to everyone there, so
it was a sort of a new start then, and you were able to make some new connections and new friends. So talk a little bit about how that worked for you.
So obviously that was so refreshing. My daughter ended up going to daycare 5 days a week after that, and I continued to study full time, and I got my license, and obviously living out of home, and learnt all these new skills like cooking, and so I really found myself after that, and I think that's where things got a little bit easier. And so, yeah,
I think it's quite hard for us to imagine how things were getting easier with all of those things that you were doing, Ebony.
Just as you say that, I was about to say, in year 12, I met my now husband, and we actually fell pregnant very quickly. Again, it was unplanned. And so I graduated year 12 with good grades, but I was about 25 weeks pregnant. And so I applied to UTAS with an ATAR score just short of 90 to study law, which had been a plan for me, but yeah, unfortunately was declined because my ATAR score fell short, or my the score that you need to get in fell short. So I obviously went on to have a little bit of a break. I deferred for a year and spent time with my baby, which was beautiful because it really allowed me to have a full 12 months off and actually have some maternity leave, which I didn't really get to experience with my first child. And then, yeah, went on to study at UTAS, and I had to maintain a distinction average in my first year to transfer across to law, which I was able to do. So I got there in the end.
Oh, that's again, it's just so we've used the word inspiring quite a bit, but I think it is absolutely fitting in this case for you to be able to balance all of those things, which are difficult for anybody, and still maintain those terrific grades, and having that goal, I think, was very clear. And we've actually got a question on the chat, but I've just got one more thing to sort of ask you before we go to that, and that's were there some people or some things that helped support you on that journey, and that really made a difference, and in terms of helping you reach those goals?
Yeah, of course. There are definitely a few very important people who I think were vital to my success in continuing my education and my journey. One of those was actually the Brave Foundation. I met Bernadette Black, who you heard from before, when I was pregnant, and she came and told me about her journey, and it really inspired me. I think that was actually the first point where I realised, having a baby and finishing your education is actually possible. So that was one really important person in my life. And then another important person was a See You at Home nurse that I had, who really encouraged me to make the choices to move out of home and to gain my independence and get my license, and just support me and my baby at the time and our health and well-being. Like I said, I really struggled with my mental health, so she encouraged me to go to the doctor and get the support that I needed. Apart from that, of course, my family was very vital, and although my mum was really scared at first, and trying to think of alternatives on how to help me out of this pickle that I found myself in, but she came around, and I managed to have a lot of support in the end.
You most certainly did. So just before we finish, there's just one question there, and that's again thanking you for your story and wishing you all the best for your final semester of law, which is just a fabulous accomplishment. But really about now you're on the board of the Brave Foundation, and how does that impact you, and how do you balance that with all of the other things, being a parent of 3 young children and studying and then being on the board? How does that work for you?
Well, I think it was very, very important to me when I got the opportunity that was presented to me to be a part of an organisation such as Brave Foundation, which really makes a real impact in young parents' lives. And I think for me, how could you say no to an opportunity like that when obviously I've had lived experience myself? So to be able to make a difference and to be able to help decision making and important things like that when I have personal experience myself, I think is just absolutely vital. So Yeah.
Oh, thank you so much. So, look, that we could have talked for quite a long time. We're getting a little bit of a wind up here in the studio. So it's just been wonderful to hear your story so far. I know you're going to go on to do amazing things and continue to be really influential. And just letting people know, we've already discussed about some things that might make life a bit easier for parents at the university. So we'll be following through on some of those things. You're a very strong young woman who've met your challenges sort of head on, and you're going to create a very exciting future for yourself and for your family. I know this. So thank you so much, Ebony, for being with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been wonderful.
So we've got one more video to look at today, and that's a chat between another brave mentor, Zen, and Alia, who is a young mum who has been supported by Zen.
Hello, I'm Zenabash, also known as Zen Tabaje. I am the mentor for Brave Foundation for the Western Melbourne. Today, I'm so thrilled and really, really happy to have Alia with me. She's our past participants, and Alia enjoyed, I think it was in April 2019, in the program. So I believe you were 18 at that time.
Yeah.
At the moment, you're 20.
Yeah.
So exciting. So you also have a daughter, 1.5.
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah. Can you share a bit about your education experience before you were pregnant?
I found out, I think, sometime October, probably early to mid-October, I found out.
Yeah.
But, I don't know, it didn't really change my mindset, if you get what I mean. Like, I wanted to complete year 12 and still, like, go into the college, to university, but just have that gap year.
So you were planning to go to university when you find out that you were pregnant, and your destination has stayed the same. It is just your journey that has been different. So your goal of finishing your education, obtaining qualification, began a year ago when you started university, which is doing biomedicine. Can you tell me your education journey to get to university actually?
So it's been rough. It was rough during the first few months.
Yeah.
Because I wasn't sure, like, how I would get there, and, like, without, because my parents helped me, but I wanted to do everything independently and not have to rely on someone. So, which was hard. But once I got there, I balanced it out with, like, having her and then having uni as well.
What has it been for you to juggle actually being a university student and also being a mom of a 1.5 years, which is your adorable daughter? Like, what has it been? How do you do it?
It's kind of funny, in the sense that whenever I'm awake and I'm ready for uni, like online, Valerie seems to wake up the same time, and she's getting her milk. She's got her cocoa melon on the side while I'm doing, like, uni stuff. She'll be watching cocoa melon.
Oh, wow.
And it seems to work out. Like, she seems to love her ABCs. So, like, she just sits there, like, I don't know, she's such a calm baby. That's what made it, like, work out even more. Like, I didn't have to ask anyone to look after her. She would just sit next to me, and she knows, like, I'm in class or something. And she would just sit there.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, she won't even disturb me. I can, like, do all these calculations, and she'll just watch Coco Melon. I said to myself, if I was to have a kid, I would try to be the best role model, like, I could be for them. And so I think that's what made me get, like, so determined to get into uni, like, finish the degree, is because I want to do everything, like, So then she could look back and be like, wow, my mum went to uni. Like, I shouldn't get myself down. Like, I should just keep pushing myself. And like, I just want her to have like that same mindset, like to never give up on her dreams. So much for having me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was completely lost at the start.
Well, look at you now.
So it falls to me now to close our first seminar, and there are quite a few people I would like to thank who've contributed to today's session. So from Brave, first of all, to Bernadette Black, the CEO and the founder of the Brave Foundation. Thank you, Bernie, for being here today and your contributions to our very first seminar, putting a hand up to be first. Thank you so much for that. To Ebony, the member of the Brave Foundation board. Thank you, Ebony, for joining us today. And of course, to all the Brave staff and participants who helped us through our recorded videos and through organising the material for today's seminar, but also who helped us with our research about the Supporting, Expecting and Parenting Teens program. From the Underwood Centre, thank you, of course, to Kitty, but also to Stuart Thorne and Tess Crellin, whose amazing technical wizardry has brought this to us today and made this seminar possible. Thank you to Sean Stevenson for all of the publicity and sorting out all of our registrations. And of course to you, the audience. So thank you for being with us and joining us today, whether you're here, you're watching live, or whether you've watched later from our recording. Especially I'd like to thank the Young Pregnant and Parenting Network for prominently featuring this information on their web page. This recording will be available from the Peter Underwood Centre website, so please share this widely. And I also hope that some of you might consider tuning into some of our next seminars for the Education Transforms 2021 series. So once again, thank you all for your contributions today, and we look forward to continuing to hear these inspiring stories and to work with everybody to improve the educational outcome of children and young people, not only in Tasmania, but of course across Australia. Thank you.